You know that feeling, right? That total exhaustion when you're tempted to just give up on a prayer because it feels like it's just going nowhere. Yeah, we've all been there. It's a totally universal struggle. So, in this explainer, we're going to dive into a really powerful way of looking at this. It reframes persistence not as some kind of chore, but as, believe it or not, the ultimate expression of faith. And it all kicks off with one pretty profound question. So we're jumping right in with this huge question from the Gospel of Luke. And listen, this isn't just some casual, off-the-cuff query. No, this is a high-stakes challenge. It's about whether belief itself can actually endure when it's up against, life's biggest and toughest trials. All right, Section 1, Stories of Divine Justice. To even begin to answer a question that big, we've got to look at the evidence, right? We need a foundation, so that's where we're going to start, by digging into these core stories that show God's divine justice in action. Okay, so our first piece of evidence, it comes from the Book of Wisdom, and man, it throws us right into one of the most pivotal moments in all of salvation history, the night of the Passover. And let me tell you, this was no quiet, subtle event. We're talking about a dramatic, world-altering, divine intervention. And the imagery here is everything. God's word isn't just, a sound. It's described as this all-powerful force, literally descending like a warrior from the heavens. And here's the crucial part. Creation itself responds. The laws of nature get rearranged to save his people. I mean, that reveals a God who doesn't just sit back. He acts, and he acts decisively. And that brings us right to the heart of why these stories are even told in the first place. This line from Psalm 105, it's not just a nice, poetic little phrase. It's a command. It's telling us you are meant to actively remember these things. Why? Because they're the concrete proof that God is faithful and that he shows up in history.
Okay, so we've seen God's direct, powerful action. Now, the gospel kind of flips the camera around and points it at us. The focus shifts to our response. Jesus tells this incredible story, the parable of the persistent widow, and it's all about the human side of this whole divine relationship.
And this right here, this is the core logic of the whole parable. Jesus does this brilliant thing where he argues from the lesser to the greater. He's basically saying, look, if even a corrupt, unjust judge will eventually cave to someone who is just relentless, can you even imagine how a perfectly just and loving God is going to respond to the cries of the people he loves? It's an absolutely powerful assurance. Okay, Section 2, the practice of perseverance. So we've kind of laid out the why, why we should have faith based on these incredible stories. But what does that actually look like day to day? Well, this next section is like our toolkit. It's the how-to guide for living out that persistent faith. And this leads us to a really key idea. Faith isn't just some internal feeling you have. It has to be shown. It has to be demonstrated. And the tangible, real-world proof of our faith, it's our willingness to just keep showing up, to keep praying, especially when we're tired, when we're weary, and when it feels like we're talking to an empty room. And this is such a vital distinction to make. True faith, true trust, it's not passive. It's not about sitting on the beach waiting for a rescue boat to show up. It is active trust. I mean, think about it. The Israelites still had to get up and physically walk through the parted sea. And it's the same for us. We're called to walk through our trials, actively participating with God in the process. So what's with this number, 1326? Well, it points to a very specific passage in the Catechism of the Catholic Church. And you can think of it like a key that unlocks how our faith is sustained in a real, tangible, physical way through one very specific practice. And here's what that's all about. That reference? It's talking about the Eucharist. It's described as the sum and summary of our faith. I mean, just think about that. It's like God's ultimate recurring promise made real. It's a physical reminder, week after week, that he's here, that he hears us, and that he's acting, even when we can't see it with our own eyes. Section 3, the search for truth. Okay, let's zoom out a little bit, because this whole struggle for faith, it isn't just a personal internal journey we're on. It's actually deeply connected to this wider universal human search for two absolutely massive concepts, justice and truth. So, when that widow in the parable is crying out for justice, what does she actually mean? Well, the Catechism gives us this really solid foundational definition. Justice is the constant and firm will to give their due to God and neighbor. It's about giving what's owed, setting things right. It's a balance. And it's so important to get this. This idea of justice goes way beyond a courtroom. We're not just talking about legal stuff here. In this context, it's about right relationships, it's relational, it's about honoring the covenant, that sacred promise between God and humanity. It's a core moral virtue that shapes how we interact with, well, absolutely everything. Now for a really fascinating connection. Get this title. Doctor Universalis. That means the universal doctor. It was a title given to a truly brilliant mind who saw this incredibly deep link between our search for justice and our search for truth. And that man was Saint Albert the Great. I mean, just look at this resume. He was a German Dominican friar, a top-tier philosopher and theologian, a doctor of the church, and he was the mentor to the one and only Saint Thomas Aquinas. But here's what's really key for us today. His rock-solid belief that faith and science are not enemies. They're just two different paths leading to the exact same destination. And this quote from him, wow, it's the master stroke that ties this whole thing together. St. Albert is basically saying that the scientist in the lab, relentlessly chasing a discovery, is practicing the exact same virtue as the persistent widow at the judge's door. Think about it. Both are persevering, both are seeking a truth. And that truth ultimately leads back to God. It's just a beautiful, unifying idea. Section 4, your final takeaway. Okay, let's pull all these amazing threads together. We've talked about divine action, our own persistence, justice, the search for truth. Let's boil it all down into one clear final takeaway. So first, let's circle all the way back to the beginning. The foundation for all of our persistence has to be the character of God himself. The stories of the Passover, the words of the Psalms, they all point to this one core promise. God remembers, God delivers, and God answers. And so here's our part to play in this whole divine partnership. And it's really simple, but that doesn't mean it's easy. Our job is to believe in that promise, to wait with that active trust we talked about, and to persevere. Persevere in our prayer and in our search for truth, just like that widow and just like that scientist. So, we end by taking that huge cosmic question from the very beginning and making it personal. I want you to think about your own life, your search for meaning, your desire for justice in the world, or your search for truth in your work or your studies. Where is that call to persevere hitting home for you right now? It's a really powerful question to carry with you.